All right, so at the state capitol yesterday, 19 electors unanimously cast votes for President-elect Donald Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. We want to bring in Lancaster County lawmaker Representative Brian Cutler. Thank you so much for joining us and for talking more about it.
Yep, happy to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania clearly critical in the election. What was your reaction to Trump winning Pennsylvania? What do you think ultimately led to his win?
Well, I think ultimately what led to his win was the policies that he was supporting, the discussions regarding the rampant inflation that's going on, as well as some of the impacts of some of the national decisions. I think that resonated in terms of the economy and the ability of families to, really understand and easily compare, quite frankly, what it was like 4 years ago versus what it was like today.
And even though President-elect Trump won Pennsylvania, Republicans in Pennsylvania didn't win the House of Representatives. In fact, they lost by just one vote to Democrats. Why do you think Republicans lost the state House?
Well, I think when you look at the maps, House Republican candidates overperformed everyone else in the ticket by in excess of almost 300,000 votes. In other words, House Republican candidates netted more than the House Democrat counterparts. Yet the maps, the way that they are drawn, are very favorable to incumbents. And in this case, that happened to favor the Democrats.
And for people who are not familiar, what's the disadvantage that Republicans face in the House for not holding the speakership or the chamber voting agenda?
Well, actually, that's the two main issues. The speaker determines all of the committee chairs and assignments, as well as the legislative agenda for the upcoming year. And, that will ultimately play out like it did last year, where we have a divided legislature. We're one of the few in the country. And that means the House Democrats and the Senate Republicans, who are in the majorities in both chambers, will once again be working with the governor for the budget.
Yeah, and you're serving your 8th term in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Give us a preview of what we can expect for the next session. What will your priorities be, and what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think as we look ahead, I think education will continue to be a focus. It's one of the reasons why I was very happy to chair the Education Committee in the upcoming session, because I think that when you look at really what's driving a lot of the state level discussions, it has been both the education funding as well as, quite frankly, the outcomes. Once again, we had test results that while they showed marginal improvement, we're still not back to pre-pandemic levels. And that's a huge problem because we owe it to our kids to get that right. And I think that we are still seeing the impacts of the shutdown on their learning potential. And it's going to take some time and some, probably out of the box thinking in order to overcome many of the challenges that they're faced with now.
Yeah, so what are the steps then that needs to happen next in order to bring kids back?
Well, I think when you look at where we're at currently, a couple of the things. One, we'll reorganize first Tuesday in January. Then the House will officially be back in business. We'll organize committees shortly thereafter. I've reached out to my Democrat counterpart who will be running the legislative agenda out of the Education Committee. And it's our hope that we can find some agreement in terms of opening up opportunities for students to have learning pathways. One of the areas that I'm particularly focused in is related to career technical centers, or what I used to call VOTEX, and that kind of hands-on trade-based education. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It's something that we started under Governor Wolf, and I hope to continue through the first part of the Shapiro term here.
Yeah, and you actually served as Speaker of the House 2 years ago. You announced that you wouldn't seek a leadership role for the next legislative session. What led to your decision?
A couple things. One of the things that we do not do very well as a chamber is really kind of hand off to the next generation of leaders. And two, we were obviously in the minority by one seat last session. And I had said and was very public about the fact that if we did not return the majority, I felt very strongly, and I'm old-fashioned this way, that it was somebody else's opportunity to try to do that. I had my shot. We didn't succeed, and I'm looking forward to returning back to legislative priorities and working at the committee level. And as we kind of go forward, I think I have a lot of confidence in our team of leaders. I think that obviously the policies will work themselves out, as well as the politics as we go forward.
And what's your advice then for the next incoming leader of the State House, Representative Jesse Topper?
Well, I think Leader Topper will do an excellent job. He did a great job as chairman of the Education Committee, so we've had a little bit of kind of role reversals here. And I think that the advice that I would give him is to continue to be himself, work hard on the issues, and success will follow.
And you brought this up earlier. Clearly, we have an evenly divided legislature. How important is it for Republicans and Democrats to work together? And is that something that's possible?
It is very important. However, I will point out that this issue was in fact raised during the deliberation and the debate around the maps, that the chair at the time said he wanted a very closely divided chamber, but the only way to get that was to draw the lines where they currently are. And the end result of that is you've got about 90 to 95 members in both caucuses who are completely safe. They'll only ever face a primary, and that is not conducive to finding solutions. When you have more seats in play, like 30 or 40, it's more likely that you'll find compromises and be able to find common ground and work together. And this map simply doesn't provide that. And that's a failure of the chairman's leadership.
All right, Representative Brian Cutler, thank you so much for joining us and for your time. Really appreciate it.